Alright. Hello everybody, welcome to the stream. I apologize for the late, but, that's, I was just trying to get ready and some things were taking longer than they should have, and you know how that goes. That's actually kind of a bit of a shame because I am really excited for tonight's stream. This is actually going to be a fun one because I decided to just give in and talk about a personal interest of mine, which is Prehistoric Life. Gosh, my computer's running a little slowly today. Prehistoric Life. Now, I figured I'd... Hold on, let's just move things around a little bit. I figured I'd just talk a little bit about something that we know a lot about since it's been dead for 5 million years. Anyway, these two pictures are of Edmontosaurus Regalis. No need to gosh. Did I seriously just exit out of Photoshop? My bad. Alright. Alright. Bring the reference photos back. Let's see, where's the other one? Back on track. So this is mounted at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. Different photos myself. Just uploaded them fresh to my computer. Thank you. And we're just gonna go on a little bit of a speculative spree and try to make our own little concept art of what this guy might have looked like in real life. Now, in case you're wondering what I'm doing, this is something that I picked up just by picked up online. A lot of people say that when they caught looking at a blank page, it sort of intimidates them because, there's just sort of messing. So I just sort of circumvent that by a little something that I got. if there's something on the page already, there's a bit less of a fear of messing it up. Something like that. And it looks a lot better from a concept art standpoint than just drawing a white canvas, giving you a little variety. Alright. Now that we have everything there, let's get going. Now, if you've been following the site for a while, you know that dinosaurs have drawn, I love talking about them, and so expect me to fully blab about them during our time here. Edmontosaurus is actually a really unique case. I mean, you look at it, you say, oh, it's just a standard duck-billed dinosaur. What could possibly be interesting about it? Now, to a skeleton of one of these things, you'll know that they're actually fairly big hadrosaurs. Stand about 10 to 12 feet tall at the hip. They've been throughout most. They're found in most late Cretaceous fossil formations through North America. Northern United States and Canada specifically. The specimen found at the museum, I think, was actually found up in northwestern Colorado. And I believe, if anybody's watching this right now or watching this later and knows more about this, feel free to correct me. But I believe that these are the largest animals found in the Hell Creek Formation. That is the same time and place where you get a lot of the famous late Cretaceous dinosaurs, like Triceratops, Ankylosaurus. And despite its size, it's actually one of the more common animals found in the area, so we know a surprisingly lot about it. Including some very complete fossil findings and even some skin samples. fix that a little bit more. There. And there. Now, of course, they're not actually skin samples. I mean, just because of the process of how fossilization works, very few of any of the remains that we find are actual bone. They've all been permineralized. But we actually find some really interesting things, like permineralized skin sections or very strong impressions from the into the rock around it. Because of that, we know a lot of things about Edmontosaurus and a few hadrosaurs in general that we don't know about other dinosaurs. For instance, despite the gracile look of this this skeleton pose here, we know that they were surprisingly very chunky. This is actually a pretty common problem with a lot of the fossil reconstructions that we find. You know, in the early days of paleontology, but for the longest time, up until the late 80s and early 90s, when we started finding all these really incredible finds and the process really started kicking off, the most we knew about dinosaurs was that they were basically really big reptiles, and so we based a lot of our reconstructions on them on just big reptiles that we knew. Not to knock early paleo art, I mean, Charles Knight was an incredible artist, and he painted some of my personal favorite paintings of all time. It's just that, you know, science is a work in progress, especially when we can't directly deal with the animals right now. And so we just sort of grew to accept the fact that a lot of our assumptions about them were wrong, and now we can move on and show that they were a lot like that. Even though they were reptiles, they were a lot like other animals that we see today. Now, when I excuse me. Now, I live in Colorado, and the Colorado State Fair was last week. And of course, state fairs, you go around and see all the animals. This one down here had a lot of cows, and you know, cows sort of have the same situation. Even though cows have really big skeletons, so much of that is covered in soft tissue that you wouldn't really get a handle on if you were just looking at the bones. And so when I see this animal, I see a lot of the same stuff, you know, big cow with a nice thick with a nice thick neck flap. Nice brown belly to take in all the food. We know that Edmontosaurus was an herbivore. We know that by, of course, looking at this nice tooth palette in here. It's actually really interesting. Dinosaurs, they actually had very simplistic jaw design compared to mammals. So even though I describe it as a cow, it doesn't necessarily chew its food like a cow. You know, our jaw can move in a lot of different directions: forward, backward, up, down, left, right. But for dinosaurs, you know, this little simple jaw design, it could really only move up and down. Which meant for the longest time, dinosaurs couldn't really chew their food. A lot of them just some of them just a lot of them they just resolve to stripping the food from branches with some very specialized peg-like teeth. But what a lot of the later herbivorous dinosaurs did was really interesting. They took a bunch of these and they lined them up all in a nice big palette in a row. Well, in a row and several rows in a palette, of course. And with all these teeth together, they just formed this nice big pad that would just catch any food in the mouth and even the shape of the skull, it was meant to be flexible, so when the mouth be a lot more narrow, and when the mouth was closed, the sides would actually flatten out like this, just because of the pressure of the skull on the teeth. And what that would do was slide these huge pads against each other to add more of a grind to it, so it would be able to more effectively chew tougher plant material. And this ability to get more food and be more energy efficient with the processing of food before it even hit the gut, that scientists believe is part of the reason why hadrosaurs were so successful during the Cretaceous period. Give the guy a bit too much of a chin there. Now, one of the cool things about Edmontosaurus Regalis in particular, this species here, was that a few years ago, it was actually found to have a little bit of a fleshy comb on its head, like a chicken or a pheasant. Now, the paper described it as a really small bit of flesh hanging off. The illustration almost made it look like a tumor or something. But it was perfectly symmetrical with the shape of the skull. And it's a and something that small is not unheard of in today's animals. I mean, not all head decorations are as ostentatious as a chicken's. You know, wouldn't necessarily have had to go up there like that. But I think I'll add a little bit of I'll take a little bit of a creative liberty and put a little bit right there. There we go. This is our big chunky chicken boy. Thank goodness nobody watches these. Ta-da. There we go, this is starting to look like a real animal now. Boy, look at that. One note about the comb thing. The headdress was only found on a specimen of Edmontosaurus Regalis in particular. We do have records of other Edmontosaurus species. I mean, they're found all over the place from the late Cretaceous, so we have Regalis and E. annectens and so on. We just don't know if the headdress here is... We just don't know if the headdress here is common with animals outside of that particular... It very well could be. I mean, there are tons of files today of a lot of different species. Well, really a lot of different families of birds in general that have fancy fleshy head crests like that. It's just hard to say anything for certain without further evidence. That's actually one of the really interesting things about paleontology as a study. I mean, it's sort of caught between it's sort of caught between two really kind of contradictory statements, so it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't type of thing. Statements being Occam's razor, you know, the simplest solution, the one that makes the fewest assumptions is probably the best one, which is in some ways an argument for conservative recreations. You know, we can't say too much about what these animals look like without proper recreations, so without proper evidence for them. So say that in terms of scientific integrity, we shouldn't be all gung-ho on all these different extreme adaptations that they have. But at the same time, the goal of paleoart is to provide an understanding of what these animals would have acted like in real life. And with real life animals, you'd never really know what to expect. I mean, like I was talking about with the cows, you would never know anything. Well, not really never, but you would have to study the skeletons of tons of different specimens if you didn't have a living cow to be able to even guess at what their actual physical appearance is like. And again, with Edmontosaurus, we just got really lucky with the one fossilization of the crust here. Fossilization is an incredibly rare process as it is. I mean, we're looking at less than 1% of all animals who ever lived have fossilized specimens, and probably less than half of those specimens will ever be found. And it's kind of incredible that we were able to find out that it had something as crazy as a fleshy crest on its head in the first place. And so, to that end, we could get as crazy as we want with these reconstructions, and they probably won't be as weird as what we find out they actually have. I mean, a lot of my favorite paleoartists today are the ones that are taking those types of risks. I mean, one artist, his name is Brian Eng. That's Brian E-N-G-H. He's known for his absolutely bizarre reconstructions. All of his dinosaurs that he draws are massive and fleshy and have these fibers sticking out of them. And they're ugly and I love them. It's one of the things that makes paleoart such a frustrating field, but at the same time, it's what makes it such a fun field to be a part of. We could be as creative as we want to, and yet at the same time, we're always at the cusp of finding some new, freaky stuff that we never learned before. For instance, this is actually a pretty nice segue. Another study about Dinosaurs was actually focused on basically the soft tissue of an entire Edmontosaurus hoof was preserved. And yes, the front foot of an Edmontosaurus was basically all just one hoof. The front feet of Edmontosaurus, they had 5 toes sticking out of it. A little thumb up here. 1, 2, 3, and a little 5th toe that sort of hung up here. Now, for most dinosaurs, including the Ornithischians, the group that covers most of the herbivorous dinosaurs, including Edmontosaurus, what we normally have is a little thumb spike here, 2 claws on the second and third toes, and these toes here wouldn't have been represented at all. They would have just been sort of fleshy nubs. But a while ago, I think it actually might have been a Gryposaurus skeleton that they found this on, which is pretty closely related to Edmontosaurus, just separated by a few million years. What they found in that was that these middle 3 toes actually were solidified into a full claw, a full sheet of keratin. And this toe here still wouldn't have really represented. But again, just crazy stuff that we wouldn't know about these animals just by looking at all the skeletons that we had discovered over the past few hundred years. Not few hundreds. About 150 years-ish. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. The fact of the matter is that we haven't known about dinosaurs for all that long. I mean, it sounds like a long time when you say it out loud, but, you know, dinosaurs are younger than America. We've known about some planets longer than we've known about dinosaurs. And by planets, I mean the really far out planets like Neptune and Pluto. Maybe Neptune and Pluto. I don't know, maybe I should actually do some research on that type of stuff before I go spying. No. But hey, that's why I do these things, so you guys can get angry at me in the comments. Please get angry at me in the comments, I'm so lonely here. Alright, now what to color this dinosaur? see. Where? Let's see, I already do the crust on this one, and when we look at soft tissue crust like this, we normally find them on the male members of species. You know, on chickens we find them on the roosters, or or you know, on deer we find them on the bucks. So I'm pretty sure I've already just made this one a male by default. So let's get a little bit crazy with the color scheme. Let's make this one... Let's make this one a fun... Gosh, I almost drew that on the wrong layer. Chat, why didn't you tell me this? I trusted you, chat. You betrayed me? There we go. Okay, not afraid to make this one super big and chunky. Because he's an animal. Actually save some room for the head because I have some different ideas about what to do for the head color. Maybe not that one. There we go. Oops. Getting a little bit too crazy on the tail there. And Let's see, let's change this background color so that we can actually see what's going on with the head here. Da-da-da. Nice papery texture here. Oh, shoot, 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 wrong there. Of course, one of the most common paleoart memes, or well, paleoart tropes in general, is to draw dinosaurs with very bird-like color schemes. You know, since closest living relatives of dinosaurs are birds. I'm not to break that because it's not implied like it. Goal's not necessarily here to break any new mold, I'm just here to draw dinosaurs. Hopefully teach you guys some cool facts and bring you along for a fun ride. Hopefully this looks like a semi-plausible swamp creature. Now there are some... Now it's not necessarily a semi-aquatic animal. You know, we definitely have footprints of animals much larger than this walking around on land. It's just that, you know, the environment that it lived in, which is the Hell Creek Formation, it's just it was just a very wet, humid environment. It almost looks like a tropical rainforest, if you will. It would have been... It would have been a series of overlapping river patterns and estuaries. You know, now these guys probably could have lived further upriver, and, you know, these guys just washed downstream, and that's just where we happen to find these fossils, since that's just a good place for fossilization to take place. But that's just one of those things where Occam's razor really fits. And hey, I personally like I personally think that swamp animals are a lot of fun to design, to really get into anyways. You know, you really play around with these color schemes here. So yeah, it's been roughly an hour, so I think it's a good time to take a quick 10-minute break. want you all to get up, stretch, walk around, get some water, do some jumping jacks, read up on some dinosaur knowledge to come back and yell at me in the comments about everything that I did wrong. Maybe go outside, see some birds, call some friends, have fun, and in about 10 minutes I will be back to have some more fun with more fun with you guys. Alright, see you soon. Hey everybody, welcome back. Hope you guys all got your business sorted out. No, I did. It was nice to get up out of this cold, dark basement and see my family every once in a while. I miss them so much. Even though I live in the same house as them and see them every day. Anyways, let's dive right back into this. When we left off, we were giving our boy, Edmontosaurus, a little bit of color. Now, I am going to continue on with this guy's color scheme as best as I can while talking about what we know. Because what we know about dinosaur color, it's kind of the same as what we know about dinosaurs in general. It's surprising how much we do know, and yet at the same time, it's a little disheartening that we don't know very much. I mean, even though, like I said, we have some pretty good skin samples of dinosaurs like Edmontosaurus, we none of them have the color data directly embedded into the fossil like we do with, say, a recently deceased animal. And of course, it would be unreasonable to think that color data would last that long. I mean, it's one of the first things to go when a modern animal dies. But at the same time, we're making some pretty good strides in finding out what these animals actually look like in real life. I mean, I know when I was a kid, I was told that was one of the big unknowns, that we'd never know what color dinosaurs were. And so imagine my surprise about 10 years ago when they came out with a study on some of the dinosaurs found in China, found in the Liaoning province, Lagerstätten. What was going on down there? That's actually a really unique case. Gosh. It's actually a really unique case where a lot of the animals found in that formation were actually covered in volcanic ash, and that ash mixed in with the mud and created a really, really, really super fine mud powder of sorts that was really able to capture all the details of the bones really well. And so we have a really, really neat instance of the and so when we look at animals there, we find a lot of really spectacular feather preservation done with really specific details, so that we can actually see, what type of feathers they had. And one of the cool things about what got preserved down there was that they actually had, the preservation of the animals down there included even some of the melanin slots, not really slots, but the space where the melanin of the animal in real life, where that was where, oh gosh, what am I trying to say? The long and short of it is that with that area preserved, we could actually make some pretty good inferences as to the amount of red and brown in the skin would have been concentrated in real life. And so, to that extent, we actually get some really interesting patterns just with those colors. I mean, in the preservation, there's an animal called a Sinosauropteryx, covered in feathers, and we were able to get with a pretty much complete specimen of that, with all of the feathers captured, we're able to get a pretty good look into what that animal would have looked like in real life. And that actually has a really unique pattern. Would have had a rusted brown back with a white underbelly and some red and some brown and white stripes going down the length of its tail, sort of like a red panda. Some of them would have been hard black feathers with an iridescent blue. Well, not really iridescent blue, but iridescent black. I guess that's just the best thing to call it. Iridescent black feathers, like a blackbird or a crow. We've found some really unique specimens that had the color data, well, not necessarily the color data, but some of the melanin data preserved into the skin itself. For instance, a few years back, there was an Ankylosaurus found in a coal mine in Canada called Borealopelta. And what we found with that was that it was so well preserved that we were able to get a look at some of the melanin concentration in its back plates. And what we saw there was kind of a beautiful autumn palette there, with alternating white and black and red scutes. Now, while that's all really interesting, and I'm really glad that there is a study talking about that, we of course still have to keep in mind that we only have a handful of studies really doing that, and that's only with a handful of really good-looking specimens. And it's likely that just looking at that, all we'll ever really know about them is just the red and black color data. Hold on, might be a little bit too loud there. My audio mixer's getting a little crazy there. Anyways, we'll probably only ever really know about the red and brown color data. And there's some that just probably won't get preserved. For instance, the color blue in animals is formed in a completely different way than red and brown is. Blue is actually made up of it's not made with a specific pigmentation. It's actually formed by the cell structure of the feather or of the feather or of the skin cells. So it's likely, and of course that degrades a lot more quickly than that's a lot more fine than gosh, what am I trying to say? That type of intracell structure that deteriorates a lot more easily than the intercell structure. The actual full cell block where we find, say, the red pigmentation. So unless we find something else that's a lot more well preserved, which we might, since a lot of this we're talking about is still up in the air. We just can't say anything too solid about that right now. Now, even though I was talking about how we'll probably never even know if blue was ever even covered in the dinosaur color palette, I'm just gonna put a little bit of blue around the outside here. Because this is my screen and this is my stream, and I'll cry if I want to. Smooth that out a little bit more. Also, thing about dinosaur colors that actually brings up an interesting point in that color is actually what separates a lot of it's actually what separates a lot of bird species and lizard species from each other. You know, a lot of birds and such that we find in the fossil record, not in the fossil record, a lot of birds that we find today, they have very similar color palette. Not color. I'm getting tripped up on my words here. Ignore everything I'm saying and listen to this. One of the interesting things about birds today is that they all have very similar skeletons, and we differentiate the species by the color palettes that they have. For instance, two animals that share very similar ranges and ecosystems and skeletal structures are crows and magpies. And, oh gosh. And we differentiate them because, you know, crows are solid black and magpies are completely, well, not completely, they're black, but they have white splotches. And so, you know, if we bring that into the realm of paleontology and paleoart, that means that, you know, oh gosh. That means that there could be tons of species that we would never know about. Simply just looking at their bones. For instance, I'm saying that this is Edmontosaurus Regalis, but between this and Edmontosaurus inactans, which was found in very similar environments, there could be a whole range of species in there that we don't know about. You know, there could be a red-throated Edmontosaurus Regalis, or there could be one that lives at a completely different time of day. You know, there could be a montane Edmontosaurus Regalis that is, you know, entirely sandy brown with black stripes. And we wouldn't necessarily know that, which in some ways is disheartening, but in other ways is also really exciting. Some people actually try to look at from the other perspective and say, Well, what about dogs? Dogs, we see a massive amount of genetic variety within just the one species of Canis domesticus, that is the common house dog, where we have all these different shapes and sizes from Great Danes and Great Danes and Chihuahuas that are still able to reproduce and create viable offspring. So they say maybe dinosaurs were like that, and maybe all of these different species are just the same species? Probably not. I mean, that one's a fun idea to think about, but it's I consider it a less viable option than the one about there being more hidden species. Simply because, that's just not what we see when we look at the genetics of birds and lizards, or birds and reptiles. When we look at those, we just look. When we look at those, we more often see the opposite of that. Like I was saying before, all these similar species having similar skeletal structures and body types. And a nice little bit of counter shading. Simply another paleo art meme I never get tired of, counter shading. Simply because we see it so often in modern animals. For those of you not in the know, counter shading, that's essentially just a term for when the stomach of the animal is brighter than when the stomach of the animal is brighter than the back of the animal. It's a great way to create a sort of false shading there. Just, period with the flat color. It almost looks like the belly is underlit here, but in the wild, when you see the sun constantly shining down on the top, this part will end up being brighter than this. It helps to break up the outline to help it sort of camouflage itself into the background a little bit easier. Now, I don't necessarily know if a male Edmontosaurus would necessarily need to worry about that, especially since I gave it such an attractive head here. But it's something that definitely would have been inherited from It's something that definitely would have been passed down genetically from its ancestors. Alongside the mutation that would have given it this bright head color here. It's just, it's all the same thing as the. It's all the same thing as, just the discussion of the other, of the color of the rest of the body. There are no concrete answers for it, but it's just something we have to talk about in art simply by right of it being a visual medium. But it's also fun because it sort of forces us to look at, the animals we have today and how they got all of their different adaptations and how they live their lives. Drawing all the spikes. Going down back. Quality content, exciting content. This is what you came to see when you said that I was when I said that I was drawing dinosaurs. You came to see all these little spikes going down the back. Okay. Looking very good there. Sort of. I don't know, actually. I'm gonna see if I can select feather. Let's see. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. Burn. All right. I think it's time to add a few little shading details. Some of the ambient occlusion. Just to help get a better sense of what this thing will look like in 3D space. Let's use a bit of a softer brush for this. Da-da-da-da. Oh boy, my sister's dogs are going nuts out there. Yep, it's getting picked up on the audio. You can hear that. Hope you're a fan. Hope you're a fan. Oh, one thing I forgot to add to this. Edmontosaurus, of course, was a dinosaur. Dinosaurs, being like birds, had beaks. Well, why did I say being like birds? They were birds. Well, not they were birds. Birds or dinosaurs. Gosh, what am I even talking about? Maybe I should do this earlier just so I'm not so insane with all my ramblings. Add a quick little eye up here. Look at my goofy little baby boy. Thank you. He's so cute. Look at him. Alright, so we have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup on the claws and the hooves and the keratin here. And before you ask, I'm saying keratin, not carrots. Keratin, I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with. It's the it's basically the hard surface. Whenever something hard is on the outside of the animal, it's probably made up of keratin. It's the same stuff that's on your fingernails. It's the stuff on the bird's beak. And the dinosaur's claws. there's actually something really entertaining about dinosaur feet. I don't know why. It might just be that I didn't know a whole lot about them when I started getting into paleoart, and when I got into paleoart, I just learned about, there's actually a whole lot of data about them, and they're completely unlike any of the animal feet that we really know about. But yeah, it might just be what I like about... It might just be the same thing that I really like in paleoart in general. It's just all this new stuff. Yeah, that's alright. There we go. Now, while I'm doing a little bit of texturing here, I should point out that one of the cool things that we know about... That's actually one of the cool things that we know about Edmontosaurus and Hadrosaurs in general from skin impressions was the shape of their scales. They actually had a pretty even pattern of hexagonal scales running all around the body. But I don't have the patience for hexagons. And really, we only have 5 minutes left on the stream, and I don't want to leave you with a bad taste of me just zooming in and going the entire time. So, that actually doesn't look too bad. Just indulge me while I do the exact thing I said I wasn't going to do. That's something that I found makes it look like a really big animal. These really big wrinkles and these loose bits here. Really, it's only useful for animals in warm environments, such as where Edmontosaurus lived. It's actually an advantage to help regulate heat. If you have all these really big wrinkles in the skin, you build up a lot of surface area, and a really high... And if you're talking about a really high surface area to volume ratio, that means that you release a lot more heat into the environment than what you generate by doing daily tasks like walking and eating. And so that's why a lot of the big animals in Africa, elephants and rhinos and such, when you look at them, they have all that very saggy skin. Oh, wrong layer. Give mine some really big strong jaw muscles and big puffy cheeks, because again, he is a rightful animal. He deserves his place in the animal kingdom. He is a majestic little chicken duck lizard monster. And by little, I mean he's roughly 30 to 40 feet long. But hey, that means he's no less capable of love. Look at that. Body positivity. More to love. Happy little fatso. Alright, it's about 8 o'clock now, so I guess that means that I'll have to stop the stream right here. But we got a lot done. So thank you all for watching. If you want to see more, please check the recordings of all of our streams on YouTube, and visit this at our website, ThadenWageArt.com. That is ThadenWageArt.com. See that right there. And yeah, feel free to comment on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter for any questions, comments, or merciless corrections that I know you guys have. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week.